Comments. Okay, I recognize the Attorney General.
Thank you very much, Speaker, for recognizing me to speak on Bill 139. I would like to first thank my honorable colleagues, the Minister of Municipal Affairs and the Minister of Natural Resources and Forestry, for their tireless work on this very important piece of legislation. As you've sort of heard and you see three of us speaking, that it has been very much a teamwork in terms of different elements of this very important bill. Speaker, I'm happy to rise in the House today to continue debate on Bill 139. And I must say, though, Speaker, that this is particularly a fairly important moment for me as a member of Provincial Parliament for Ottawa Centre. Not only because reforming the Ontario Municipal Board was a major component of my mandate letter that was given to me by our Premier, Speaker, but also because it is a very important mandate that was given to me by the constituents of mine from Ottawa Centre. This has been an issue, Speaker, around land use planning, land use appeals, and the Ontario Municipal Board that I have been involved in working along with my community of Ottawa Centre. I will say for my entire time that have the privilege to serve my constituents. In fact, Speaker, if I go back to around 2010, I had the great honor of organizing a very significant, thoughtful and thorough, I would say, a town hall, a summit on the possible ideas around reforms of OMB. It was very well attended by my community. We had community activists, we had developers, we had lawyers who specialize in the area of development law attend that consultation. We had speakers from all those three groups present, and we were able to really create, if I could say this, a safe space, Speaker, to have a meaningful and thoughtful discussion around what are the challenges are, what are the opportunities, understand different point of views, and come up with ideas as to how we can best accomplish reforming our land use planning appeal system. And the byproduct of all that work was a report that I was able to create, a draft that came out of that discussion, which then I started sharing with various ministers, going back to then Minister of Municipal Affairs and Housing, Kathleen Wynne, and others, as to the kind of practical ways we can reform the OMB. So, Speaker, you can imagine now coming full circle, being in the role of the Attorney General, which I was not at that time. I was just a member of Provincial Parliament for my community. To be able to do that work has been personally quite rewarding for me on behalf of my community. There was a few things that we had outlined in that document, which, by the way, was part of my own local campaign commitment to my community in the 2011 election. Starting with making sure that we have greater deference for municipal decision making, and I'll speak to that in a moment, that we're doing this in this legislation, making sure that we create more mediation opportunities in our dispute resolution within the OMB, making sure that we create more certainty for our planning documents like official plans, secondary plans, community design plans, exactly that what we're doing in this legislation, Speaker. And also, I had spoken about at that time an anti-SLAPP legislation, which I was quite honored to bring as part of a private member's bill that was then adopted by the government, by then Attorney General John Gerritsen and Madeleine Mayer, and is law as well. So if I look through my sort of checklist of things that we outline, it's 10 out of 10 so far. So I feel quite grateful. I do, Speaker, want to mention a few names of individuals who have been very helpful to me by giving me advice and from a community perspective. These people who I serve in my community, and these are people who know these issues quite well, who sort of are sort of, if I can use the term, kitchen cabinet, group of advisors who I've had the privilege of bouncing ideas and getting advice. People like Jay Balz from Hintonburg, people like Bob Brocklebank from the Glebe, Don Stewart from Champlain, Westboro Beach, excuse me, Speaker, Sheila Perry, who is part of the Federation of Community Associations, Caroline McKenzie, also from the community of the Glebe. These are regular day citizens of the great community of Ottawa Centre, people who really take their responsibility to our community very seriously. They're thoughtful people who give advice all around and have been very helpful to me. I also want to acknowledge Speaker, organizations like the Greater Ottawa Home Builders Association and people like John Hebert and Pierre Dufresne from Ottawa, who've been very helpful and advised. We may have not agreed 100% on every single point, but nonetheless, Speaker, I cherish our friendship, and I really appreciate their thoughts. Speaker, so let me just get into a little bit of a detail after third reading, what this sort of the key components from my perspective that's very important in this bill, and that the Ministry of the Attorney General have a significant input in the legislation. Speaker, the government is proposing a number of reforms through Bill 139 that will help build a stronger planning process for municipalities across Ontario. The changes we are proposing center around 4 key pillars. Number 1, creating greater predictability for residents, communities, and developers by sheltering certain major planning decisions from appeal. Number 2, giving greater deference to the decisions of local communities while ensuring that development and growth occurs in a way that is good for Ontario and its future. Number 3, ensuring faster, fairer, and more affordable land use planning appeals. And lastly, Speaker, providing access to free legal and planning support for Ontarians. Let me take a little bit of time, Speaker, to just go through all those 4 things, because I think it really captures well what we are accomplishing through Bill 139 that is before you. Strong communities, Speaker, take careful planning and careful development. I think we all know that from our respective communities. So it only makes sense that our appeal process supports those plans by giving communities and developers more predictability. That's why the proposed measures to transform Ontario's land use planning appeal system include exempting a broad range of major land use planning decisions from appeal, including new official plans, major official plan updates, and detailed plans to support growth in major transit areas. These exemptions will help provide greater certainty in the planning system and will go a long way in helping developers and communities prepare to build stronger and more prosperous municipalities. To help ensure that the voices of local communities in particular are heard, the proposed legislation will require that a tribunal give greater weight to the decisions of the local communities. This would be achieved by eliminating lengthy and costly hearings for the majority of planning appeals and ensuring that some matters could only be appealed on the grounds that they don't conform or are not consistent with provincial and municipal plans and policies. What this means, Speaker, is that the new tribunal, the Local Planning Appeal Tribunal, could only overturn the municipal decision if it does not follow provincial and local plans for policies. If the tribunal finds that the municipality's decision does not conform to an official plan, then the matter would be sent back to the municipality for reconsideration, which will help keep planning decisions local. Taken together, Speaker, the changes to exempt some planning decisions from the appeal process, coupled with our proposal to give greater weight to decisions made from local communities, I feel strikes the right balance between supporting development while also protecting local interests. I think, Speaker, it's very clear, especially when it comes to those very foundational planning documents like official plan. There's a lot of work that goes into creating those. There is a lot of requirements under the Planning Act to create those decisions. And once consultations take place, drafting of those plans, reconsideration, which municipalities do, these are 2 to 3 year processes. Those plans then, once approved by City Council, as Speaker knows, goes to the Minister of Municipal Affairs, who then, his staff, has to go and review those things, make sure that they're consistent with the Planning Act, that they're consistent with the provincial policy statement, and then further back and forth happens and they get approved. After all that, it is important that those decisions are sheltered so that there is predictability and certainty for communities who've done the hard work in developing these plans to say, okay, now let's start implementing it. Currently, Speaker, what happens is that most of those plans get appealed to the OMB, and you get this another kick at the can, another dragging down the time frame, 3-4 years before those plans becomes a final. The result is tremendous amount of acrimony that takes place in the community because you do not have that predictability, and that's where we get that friction that we see so often between communities, between our residents and developers. Nobody wants that. I know, speaking to a lot of developers, they don't want that. They want the same predictability and certainty, and we really feel, Speaker, that this particular change allows for that. Speaker, let me now talk about how we're trying to make the appeal process more faster, fairer, and affordable as well. If given the choice to go through a lengthy hearing or to have an opportunity to settle some or all of the issues without a hearing at all, I'm sure that most people in Ontario would choose the latter. That's why under the new tribunal, the government will be requiring parties in major land use planning appeals to participate in a mandatory case management conference prior to a hearing, to identify, define, and narrow the scope of the appeal and discuss opportunities for settlement, including mediation. You may recall I had mentioned that early on as one of the things that I thought should be done, which would ultimately avoid the hearing process altogether. Speaker, in my opinion, I'm sure many would agree, this is a far better option because it really allows to bring parties together, really allows to say, okay, what are the issues at stake? What issues can be resolved before even going to a hearing? And hey, is there an opportunity to mediate something? I rather take a collaborative process with the opportunity to a win-win solution over any day as an adversarial where winner takes all. I know I'm a lawyer. It's hard for me to say this because we like those educative processes, but Speaker, mediation and case management is always the best way to go. Speaker, we're also taking a number of steps to make the appeals process more efficient. For example, by establishing clear timelines for the hearing processes so that people can get a better sense of how long the whole process is going to take. Our proposed changes would not only result in more effective hearings, but would also support a culture shift to a less adversarial system. For example, we are proposing to get rid of lengthy and often confrontational examinations and cross-examinations of witnesses by parties and their lawyers at most major hearings. Instead, we will clarify the new tribunal's power to effectively guide the hearing by examining parties, witnesses, and anyone else who appears before the tribunal. The tribunal would also have the power to ensure hearings are effective and fair by requiring parties to produce evidence or witnesses for examination by the tribunal where appropriate. In addition, Speaker, under the new Act, we are proposing to give the government the ability to make regulations that govern the practices and procedures of the tribunal, provide for the use and composition of multi-member panels, and prescribe timelines for proceedings before the tribunal under the Planning Act. Really keen about that, Speaker, because this is where our opportunity is to make sure that we streamline the timelines. One of the concerns I've heard from developers in particular, how long the OMB process takes. That's a project on hold for a long period of time, right? I mean, these people are creating opportunities, creating jobs, building housing for people at an affordable price. Let's get these cases resolved in a shorter period of time, and this is our opportunity to make sure that we've got some really good presumptive timelines as to how long the new tribunal process will take. Speaker, I really strongly feel that these are important tools that will go a long way to improving the procedures at the tribunal. Finally, Speaker, I would like to talk about how we are helping citizens to access the appeal process through the proposed creation of a new local planning appeals support center. Speaker, I think all members can attest to how many bake sales that we all have been to by local community associations to help them support OMB appeals. I've got a waistline to show for that. I think we all know that the communities work really hard because they don't have the resources to find these appeals. And one of the feedback I've received that OMB processes are expensive. Lawyers, planners, all kinds of expert witnesses, the time required. People who work in community associations, they're volunteers. They're just like you and I. I think a lot of us had a start in public service by volunteering at these community associations. And we ask a lot of them when they're just trying to keep their neighborhoods livable, when they're just trying to make sure that their community is something that they can recognize and they're part of that process. And so I've heard a lot of feedback as to how can we improve that process, what supports can we provide local communities in the entire land use planning appeal system. Now, Speaker, we appreciate that people don't always agree with local land use planning decisions that affect them, but we've also heard that concern that people have that they don't have access to information about the appeal process and planning or legal advice. That is why we're proposing changes that will empower and support people who want to participate in the appeal process. This will be done by establishing a new independent agency called the Local Planning Appeal Support Center. This center will help ensure the views of local communities are taken into account when major decisions are made by providing free legal and planning advice to Ontarians throughout the appeal process, including representation in certain cases. The center will help Ontarians understand and participate more effectively in the appeal process by providing general information about land use planning, offering guidance on the tribunal process, and providing legal and planning advice at various stages of the appeal process, which may include representation in some cases. Land use planning directly impacts Ontarian speakers, so it is critical that they feel supported in the decision-making process. As such, we're also proposing that the tribunal build a new, revamped, user-friendly website. So once an appeal process is complete, tribunal decisions would be posted for all to see, and that includes new summaries of decisions that would be explained in plain language. The new website also, Speaker, will also make it easier for the public to access information in different formats, such as videos. Again, idea is very simple, is to take our community's perspective, to think from their eyes for a moment, see what kind of supports they need so they remain an active participant in the neighborhoods that they're building. Speaker, I'm quite confident that these proposed changes would be successful in bringing effective change to the appeal process within the land use planning system. These are changes that, to me, continue to help represent the interests of developers while also helping to give residents a real voice when it comes to land use planning decisions. Everybody, Speaker, I've heard from and spoken to on this issue has told me that they don't like dispute resolution process. Nobody wants to go to court, Speaker. We go to courts when we can't, when something has broken down in the system. When disputes occur is what we need. That should not be the norm. That should always be the exception. I say this as the Attorney General. I say this as a very proud lawyer, that should never be the default. What we need, Speaker, and I think what Bill 139 is really accomplishing, is making sure that we've got good planning decisions taking place upstream, i.e., at the community and the municipal level. The amazing thing has been, Speaker, over the years, our municipalities have really done a good job in refining their planning decision-making process. It's not the time around like the 1950s or whatever, where you needed sort of a check at the provincial level. We have sophisticated expertise at a local level, and we need to make sure that we respect that, and the deference aspect allows for us to do this. Not to mention, Speaker, we need to make sure that the communities have a voice as well. What I have always felt, what the message that I always received from my community, the amount of time that I've been working on this issue is that we need a process that allows for and enables community-inspired development. That is what we're trying to accomplish. Because in the end of the day, it's the residents, it's the neighbors who have to live with the development that takes place. They need to make sure that they're part of this. You know, I can tell you that my constituents are not NIMBYs. They appreciate intensification. I represent a downtown community, as Speaker knows. They appreciate intensification. What they want to see is a plan, a design, something that is contributing to the livability and the sustainability of the community. It mixes and matches with the goals, the inspirations, and the aspirations of the community. And that, to me, Speaker, is community-inspired development. Developers also doesn't want to fight with the neighbors because they're trying to enhance the neighborhood. They will be bringing more neighbors. It only makes sense that we create opportunities in the system where there's less conflicts and more opportunities to collaborate. I really strongly believe, Speaker, that Bill 139 accomplishes that. The changes that we've made to the Planning Act a few years ago that allowed for more community consultations, making that consultations and that feedback is part and parcel of the entire planning decision, coupled with what is offered in Bill 139 by empowering local municipalities, by creating more incentive for them to do their planning updates, to do their secondary plans or community design plans, to do their zoning bylaw updates. It really allows for, Speaker, more of that community-inspired development. I just want to say thank you to my community for Ottawa Centre for giving me the opportunity year after year to work on this very important file. We always knew from the beginning that this is not going to happen overnight, but I'm really proud here to stand to say that it is happening. Your ideas and your thoughts and your suggestions are now part of Bill 139, and I hope all members will support this important bill so that we can really ensure that we have community-inspired development across the province of Ontario. Thank you.